What's up, Compete Training Academy family? Welcome to the Compete Mentality Podcast. The mission of the Compete Mentality Podcast is to motivate, educate, and inspire others to compete. No matter what area of life you're in, we are all called to compete. Our definition of competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard. This episode of the Compete Mentality Podcast is sponsored by the Lewis Jackson and Jordan Delks Basketball School. Be looking for details coming in April on our social media avenues. It is now my absolute pleasure to introduce Tri-Central and Gardner Webb legend, Grayson Flittner. Grayson, thanks for joining the podcast tonight, man.
Yeah, happy to be here, man.
Absolutely. And for you listeners, Grayson and I were just kind of catching up before this podcast on just kind of the good old days and Indiana basketball. And for those of you that follow this podcast pretty regularly, I had said that the best game I'd ever seen was a game that Grayson absolutely dominated and won. So this is a special one for me. I looked up to this guy a lot just by the way he approached the game and the way he approached basketball. And so I'm really excited to dive in and just kind of chop it up together. So appreciate you coming on. And just to kind of start out the podcast, Grayson, we're big foodies, Courtney and I. We're trainers and we help people stay accountable on the court, off the court, and their nutrition. But man, we really like our cheat meals and trying out new places. And I know you're in the great state of North Carolina. That's where I was born. So give us your go-to restaurant and describe what you would order right now, man.
Yeah, I would go to an Outback or a Longhorn, any kind of solid steakhouse. Order me the biggest ribeye I can find, baked potato, side salad, and I'm good to go, man.
That's as Indiana as it comes, man. My wife and I,
medium rare, just
yep,
good old steak.
That's right. My wife and I, we just invested into a Traeger, and we just had some New York strips on the grill right before this, and some baked potatoes and a side salad. So it doesn't get better than that.
I'll wait for my invite.
Yeah, hey, you're always welcome here and in the barn, and I'll have a steak for you, and we'll be ready to go when you get here.
There we go, man.
But Grayson, honestly, like I told the audience, this is a special podcast for me, just being able to look up to you. And actually, believe it or not, my only son, his name is Grayson. And I remember like we were talking through names, for kids and how tough that is. And his name actually was going to be Clay. And it was Clay forever. And then literally like the day we go into the hospital, I'm like, man, I just think it should be Grayson. And she's like, well, do you know any Graysons? And I'm like, no, like I personally do. Like we wanted to choose a name. We personally didn't know anybody.
Yep, I got that.
Like
yep.
I don't, but I played against this guy who could shoot the three like nobody's business. And his name was Grayson Flittner. And I pull up your highlight and like, I'm like, this is this guy. She's like, all right, we can name our son Grayson. So that's a little background, but I'd love to hear your background and give our audience your background and kind of how you got to where you are today, man.
Yeah, grew up in Tipton, Indiana, which is fairly similar to Rossville. Pretty small town. Obviously in Midwest Indiana, you grow up playing basketball. So I grew up playing from a young age, got started in the AAU circuit pretty young, did all that. Obviously, it was real nice to be close enough to Indianapolis where you could get really competitive and kind of a different world than a Rossville or a Tipton.
I believe you played with some absolute dogs on your age.
I played with Indy Heat, which was the Greg Odens and the Mike Conleys of the world. So
yep.
If I thought I was pretty good, I'd go to Indy and get humbled pretty quick. So I knew there was always better, bigger, which was always a good thing for me. Played high school basketball at Central, which is small A school. Had a good career, fun career, played with some really good guys, played against some really good guys. Continued on after high school to Gardner Webb, which is a Division I school here in North Carolina, Boiling Springs, which is another small town, small school. Not many kids go there. It's about a block all the way around. You can get anywhere. Had a good career there. Had some knee injuries, knee surgery. Played a season of professional basketball in Australia, which was awesome in time of my life before one more knee surgery kind of ended the basketball playing career. Found a college coaching gig in Olney Central, which is a junior college, and coached there for 4 years, which was a good experience where I met my wife actually. And then after that, did some odd and end training things for a year or two, and then decided family painting business here in North Carolina, came back to it and worked with my dad. So
Man, that's the Indiana basketball dream right there. And I kind of want to pull bits and pieces from each of that story just to kind of develop this podcast. And I really want to go back to your high school career, and that's where I really got to know who you were. And you're a year ahead of me. I believe you're 07, right?
06.
06. Okay, so I was 08, and and I remember seeing you play, and I said this a couple podcasts ago. I remember guarding you for a possession where I didn't start on you for a reason, and I remember getting switched on to you and just kind of praying for dear life, like, man, I pray this guy doesn't make me look bad. And you kind of gave me a hesitation move and just pulled a three from about 28 feet, and it rimmed in and out. And I cannot take any credit for that miss. That's a fact. But I want to talk about your high school career.
Absolutely.
And just how you developed into such a great player. Really just kind of your personal process of what you did to become such a great high school player. And if you could credit anybody, a coach or a mentor in that process.
Yeah, well, I'll take it back. Obviously, we were talking a little bit AAU, but even before that, had an older brother who's 5 years older than me. And growing up, I knew to survive playing with him and his buddies, had to learn how to be tough. Knew they were bigger than me, had to learn how to shoot because I knew I wasn't going inside. Knew going at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, going home crying to mom wasn't going to do any good. So you had to learn some toughness. And then obviously he played in high school, so I looked up personally to the Austin Parkinsons. I remember watching him at Northwestern, obviously.
Yeah.
Taking, as you're saying, taking bits and pieces. I remember watching Austin Parkinson for the first time, and his passes sound small, but even when I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, just more crisp than everybody. It was just on a different level than your regular high school person. There was the different players like that I constantly looked up to.
That's a great name. I love Austin Parkinson, the way he played the game, and my wife actually got to be his director of basketball operations. So that's a good name right there.
Yeah, Purdue guy. Obviously, I know you're. Yeah. Even Justin Chittick, who was a Rossville guy. He just from where we are, he was super athletic. We're more athletic than your average guy in our area. So I could pull all different kinds of names from our area that just I looked up to, and I something that's a little different with kids in today's world. I loved watching basketball and picking up on little things. I didn't necessarily love the and one crossovers or the flashy dunks or the whole process of what true basketball is. To me, is what I really kind of always appreciated growing up. So I would say my brother playing with him and all his buddies was a great experience. Like I was saying, the AAU and small town Indiana is a good player. Go to Indianapolis, play with some of the best kids in Indy. You realize there's more to work on. So I never felt like I was the biggest, the best, or anything else. I constantly knew kind of I needed to get better always. And so AAU was a great experience. I don't know if the name rings a bell. Red Taylor, played with for Red Taylor at AAU, Municipal Gardens.
Yes,
The Indiana
absolutely.
legend.
Yes, absolutely.
And he was kind of my first coach that I really remember taking a lot from. He was big on the pass, reward the passer, point to the passer, old fashioned things that you kind of lose now, that I really appreciate when a kid gets a nice pass, and instead of throwing up the 3-point fingers or anything else, his first thing is, passing to a teammate, and just some old fashioned basketball stuff that I appreciate. And actually, Brad Stevens, before he went to Butler, he was coaching with Red Taylor. He coached our 3rd and 4th grade teams with Red Taylor. So I obviously at the time had no idea what kind of career he was going to have, but pretty neat to say that he was a 4th grade coach. I don't know that many 4th graders get the opportunity to say a Boston Celtics head coach was their 4th grade coach, but pretty neat.
Unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Yeah.
But yeah, outside of that, I just constantly playing. What was my biggest thing? There was a courts a few miles away from us. I know kids can't necessarily do this, but after school, I'd go to the courts and play until it was dark, and then walk a couple miles home, and just loved playing basketball.
That's fantastic. And I want to go specifically to a game in your high school career that I want to transition this podcast to. And this was a game at Case Arena in Frankfort, Indiana. It was in the regional. And I remember, so Lafayette Central Catholic was just incredible team. And I tipped my hat to all those players that played there. And never won a sectional championship because they were in our sectional.
Oh, yeah.
We were always fight. I mean, that's who we were battling against. And I remember losing to them and crying, sobbing on the floor, in the locker room. Just it meant so much. And then me and my buddies going to the regional, and we were your biggest fans. Just in the front row, rooting you guys on again in an underdog situation. And I really just want to talk about this game. Lafayette Central Catholic picked to win the state, where you scored 48 points and won the game. I'd love for you to just talk about that whole day and that whole experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that remember that.
First off, Case Arena has to be, in my opinion, even before that game, one of the coolest high school venues to possibly play. And I may be a little biased because I remember even before class, there was class basketball having the sectionals there when I was 4 or 5, and Clinton Centrals and Tiptons and Rossville, everybody was, and just how cool that place is. But yeah, Blue Chips, where Blue Chips was recorded, right. Just great movie. But yeah, no, and I'll even take it back to the night before the game. Obviously, it's regional Saturday, which is 2 games. But can remember the adrenaline start kicking in even the Friday night, where you're restless. I remember having the basketball, laying down at 10 p.m. and just tossing it up, throwing it around. You got the jitters already. Just any Indiana high school basketball kid getting ready to play for a regional. Remember waking up, obviously you play the morning game, which I'm not a morning person, a morning basketball player. So we played University, which I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I don't remember much about that game other than I knew if we win that one, you play LCC, right? And they're the pinnacle, the team that in our area that you respect so much you hate them, and just they've got the state titles, they've got the names, they've got everything, right? But they are it, and we had our battles. We'd actually played them a month before, and they had beat us by 14, 16 points, whatever. And honestly, that wasn't as close as the game actually was. So
yeah, I was at that game. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of, and actually it was at home. So I remember I knew our margin for error was very, very tiny if we were going to pull off the upset in Case Arena. And I know, and previously talking with you, you say single-handedly beat LCC. I'm the ultimate team guy, or I like to feel like I always want to be. I never saw it. My job was the easy one to make the shots and do all that. But that team that year was by far the coolest team I'd ever been on, with how everyone accepted their roles. Obviously, it's not the easiest thing for one player to take a lot of the shots or have the ball 75% of the time, and the Shane McCorkle's setting the screen for me constantly, the Matthew Bozels, the Jake Ritchies, who I'm going to lock up the best defender, and while I slag off on probably the fourth or fifth best player, so I don't get in foul trouble, so it really was a team effort. I know I had the majority of the points, but it was a really cool night. And I go back to that team too. They couldn't have been happier for me, which is a crazy feeling when you think about team sports and team bat, how cool that really is, that, here's these guys that shoot 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 times a game, don't get their name in the paper like I would, the picture in the paper like I maybe would, but are there cheering me on, and it's just like, no, I should be thanking you guys. It's basketball is a cool sport in that aspect, but so that's what I remember from it.
And that means a lot for you to say that, and really tells me a lot about who you are in regards to that game. And I actually was able to do a podcast with Jake Ritchie a couple days ago that hasn't been released yet. It'll probably be released before this podcast. So if you're listening, you probably heard that one. And Jake had all that to say about you as well, and of just how great of a guy you were, and how much you appreciated each and every one of your teammates, and that's what it's all about. And
it is, and that's not that. Like I say, I know people say great shooter, great pass, whatever they want. Number one thing that means the most to me is when one of my own teammates were to compliment me that I was the greatest teammate they ever played with, or one of the most sincere teammates they ever had, because that is, like you say, the memories that I have are with my teammates, not so much anything I ever did or accomplished.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I kind of want to transition this podcast into after your high school career. So I believe you led the state in scoring your senior year. Is that correct?
I did. It was me and Vaughn Duggins actually was a few tenths of a point behind me.
Another good name.
End of the year, but yeah, obviously great player, great athlete too. But
yeah, I believe it was 29 point something.
Yeah, you're close. Yeah, I wouldn't know either.
Yeah, 29 point something. I'm a stat guy. I remember stuff. I remember it was right around there. And I'd love to hear, state leading scorer, tell us about your recruiting process and kind of how that all went down.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily, obviously, Rossville's, Tri-Central's, small town Indiana, not tons of guys are going D1 route. D2. It's not as popular as the Indy area per se.
Sure.
So didn't necessarily know how it was going to work. Had some D2, some smaller D1s contacting me. I've always been confident in my ability. I've always been close enough to the Indy area where I knew what I was capable of. So I kind of in my head knew what I wanted to do, what kind of level I wanted to play at.
Absolutely.
I remember playing in 8th grade, even the OJ Mayos, who was a big name when we were growing up. And in 8th grade, I remember going up against him and guarded him. He guarded me, and felt like I definitely got the better hand. So kind of told me like, I can play with these guys. I can do it.
Right.
So anyway, it got into junior, senior year, and I'm kind of the type of guy that lets stuff happen. It's got to be natural, just no reason to force. Stuff didn't necessarily work out how I was wanting. Stayed pretty patient. Even going through senior year, had some phone calls to some small D1s, but nothing made sense. Towards the end of my senior year, Michael Lewis, who's played at Indiana, now at UCLA, I believe, was at Eastern Illinois, offered me, still didn't seem right. Graduate high school, still nothing. I'm thinking maybe, it's just in the cards. I go to an IU at Purdue, just be a student. And that's when it was middle of summertime when Coach Holtman, Chris Holtman, who's at Ohio State now, was at Gardner Webb at the time. I talked to him one other time early in my senior year. He said that they had a walk-on spot. At that point, still honestly pretty calm, accepting with whatever direction I was supposed to go or do. Went down there for a visit. Liked it. It made sense, felt comfortable, natural. And so that's how I ended up at Gardner Webb. But yeah, for the most part, didn't really know, but never pressed anything or anything of that nature.
That's so interesting. I've always wondered because from my perspective, and I've coached college basketball for 4 years, and I'd always been a fan of the way you played the game and been respectful of your talent and known being a Purdue guy, I'm thinking, man, this guy could really help us. This guy could really help us. And so it absolutely blew my mind all the time. I remember this is back when, I'll be honest with you. This is old school days. I checked the paper every morning,
Yeah, no, that's I had people, contact the Paul Lust when he was there at the time, and because that's when I say I kind of envisioned what level I wanted to play. I was thinking, I can probably play in the Big Ten. Am I going to be a star? No, but I can prove myself, and so that's I had people reach out to the Purdues, the Indianas, let me walk on. I have. Kind of my greatest asset was let me go prove something to somebody, because now I can have a chip on my shoulder and really show them. But yeah, tried those avenues and none of that worked out, which that's how life goes, and you move on, and another opportunity popped up.
Right. And the right opportunity popped up. We were able to play for Coach Holtman and had an unbelievable career at Gardner Webb, and we'll dive into that. But man, I will say on this podcast right now, all those people that passed up on Grayson Flittner, you absolutely missed out. There's no doubt about it. And I bet that was part of the chip on your shoulder and the way you played the game the rest of your college career, no doubt.
That to a degree, that's kind of how, my whole career kind of continued on and progressed, because when I was in middle school, I was just bigger. I was the 6th and 7th grade person that was shaven, It was just matured before everybody. So it was, he's just bigger and better, and it'll catch up with him in high school. All right. So that gave me the opportunity. I got to go prove myself in high school. So as a freshman going up against the Jordan Brewers and some of the guys.
That's a good name, Jordan Brewer. For all you Clinton County listeners, I need to get Jordan Brewer on this podcast. He's an absolute legend, and I respect the way he plays the game. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, that was kind of the guy that was a little ahead of me in our conference that, I got to keep up with these guys. And then it was high school that, he plays 1A. So, he can't go play the college level. So it was always the next step. I was never going to make it. And so that was kind of always fuel to my fire, if you will. And then obviously we can even segue if you want into the Kentuckys and playing the big dogs. Cause that was my shot to, I can do this. I can play against these guys and be successful.
Absolutely. And you're right. That's the perfect segue. I really want to talk about your unbelievable college career that you had. And I followed it closely. I mean, like I said, in your conference and 2 years behind you. And I believe you set the Dean Dome record. Is that correct? 9 threes?
Yeah. Senior year. I actually think I tied it with somebody else, but yeah, nine threes in a game.
Yeah. So 9 threes at the Dean Dome. You beat Kentucky. I'm going off memory here, you beat Oklahoma or UConn or maybe both.
We played with Oklahoma. That was back when Blake Griffin.
Yes.
We led most of the game. They ended up.
You had 20 plus in both those games, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Played well against Oklahoma and UConn. So would love to hear about just playing college basketball is just such a great experience. And I had the opportunity to play at a small college level as well. And it's just an unbelievable experience. And what are 2 things you truly loved about playing college basketball?
Yeah, that's good question. The thing I go back even on my summer recruiting trip with Coach Holtman was you're going to find out whether you like the game of basketball or love the game of basketball when you become a college basketball player, because it's not your 3:30 to 5:30 practice after high school and you go home and it is a constant. You wake up at 6 a.m. You're doing something until 8 or 9 p.m. and it's all basketball related. And I say that even your classes and everything else, you get in one class, you go to an individual workout, you go back to class, you go to lunch, and you find out whether you were just playing it because it was fun or because you really love it, you have a passion for it and everything else. And obviously I loved it. I loved everything about the whole process of what it was. Something that going back to being a teammate, you're with your teammates 24/7, building relationships with them. Some people would say that got old. That was always number one for me, the coolest thing, going to different places, staying in hotels with the guys, waking up, going playing a game, getting back home. Honestly, just being around the guys, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm sure we both look at it now. Boy, would we go back and do that in a heartbeat, because you don't get that opportunity anymore, just being with the guys all the time and bus trips. And so honestly, I would say that above, obviously the games are awesome and all that, but just being on a team with teammates that you like is number one. And then I watched your podcast with Corey Dunn, and he's 100% right. That feeling, that adrenaline, it's a drug when you're in an atmosphere of 15,000, 20,000 people that you absolutely cannot get anywhere else. It can't be replicated. It's just a fantastic feeling of that environment, that atmosphere. Luckily, we were lucky enough to be in Indiana high school basketball, where we got that as high school players. Most Friday and Saturday nights. Most kids, I being in North Carolina now, you go watch a high school game, and first off, it's not to knock anybody, but you go in a gym and it kind of looks like an elementary or middle school gym in our Indiana parts, and it's just like there's 50 people here, and it's just a different world in Indiana, which is we were very fortunate to grow up in.
There's no doubt about it. And I'm training a lot of guys who are playing college basketball right now. And it's always hard not to want the next stage in life. It really is. And I want to encourage you guys listening to this podcast right now to just really enjoy those moments you have playing college basketball. Because just like Grayson said, for him and I mean, we'd trade places with you in a heartbeat to be able to just go to war together and dive on that floor and run that set play and do all those things that you guys are doing. It's just a really special 4 years. And I know COVID's been tough, and you just keep your head up, you keep competing, you stay together with your teammates, lock arms. You're going to get through it, and you're going to be more mentally tough than Grayson or I ever was, because you're going through the hard times. So I just want to encourage you with that. But Grayson, from my perspective, you really played with really a lot of confidence, a lot of swagger in your game. I mean, you're like you said earlier in the podcast, you were just really confident in your game and who you were. And that's really, and it wasn't in a, from a fan's perspective, from my perspective, when I watched you, like, I didn't think like this guy's a jerk. I didn't think that. I didn't think that this guy thought more of himself than he ought to. So, like, how did you have that confidence and swagger, and how'd you develop that?
Yeah. It's always interesting to hear different people's perspective of me, because I get a realm of different. He showed no emotion to he was cocky to he was lackadaisical and didn't care to just an array of things. So I always appreciate different perspective. But to me, I guess a lot of it came when I was young, and in the small town. I remember even hearing third, fourth, fifth grader, parent. If I did talk and was personable, I was cocky. If I kept to myself and was quiet, then I was stuck up. So it was weird. But even as a young kid, I remember feeling that and kind of, in my mind, all right, just show no emotion, and let them a bigger picture, show them who I am and what I am. As I grew up, I want to say I carried that with me, but I also, I think staying level-headed, poised, if you will, was always one of my better assets. And to be poised, can't get too high, you can't get too low. You got to stay locked in at the task at hand and what you're trying to do. So, in my mind, that's what I was always trying to do. Obviously, I always tried to use my basketball IQ. Was also what I feel one of my greatest assets is stay poised, figure out how you can be successful in any situation. And I would say that's whether it's confidence or what you saw versus what someone else saw, is I was trying to stay poised. I also always considered myself a leader, whether it was a middle school, high school, college. Guys are constantly looking at you. If I look rattled, if I'm pouting, if I'm going to the refs, the coach, doing this and that, does no good. They look at me and I'm stone faced, and to go back to the array, no one knew what I was thinking, no player. So that was always the best mentality I could go with, was they're looking at me. They, like you're saying, you guarded me. You're thinking I'm going to score. For all you know, I was looking, oh no, Jordan Delks is guarding me. I'm not getting around him, but you didn't know that. And so to me, just being kind of stone faced, no emotion, was always my best approach.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, that's no doubt one of your best attributes. And I think that's really cool. And my wife, Courtney, she was Miss Basketball in
Mhm.
2010. And She didn't show a lot of emotion either. And I've heard her tell stories about how you couldn't win, really. You showed emotion, you were cocky. If you didn't, you're
Yeah.
lackadaisical.
Well, yeah, and not that I was one to worry about that, but
Yeah.
I don't want to be the bad guy or like I said, I pride myself on being a good teammate. So if someone didn't think that, then how do I fix that? How do I become a better teammate, or how,
Yeah.
while still playing at the level I want to play at to help my team win. So
Absolutely. And Grayson, like you really are known for. You're just, like I said at the beginning, one of the best 3-point shooters I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of basketball games. I've seen a lot of good players. But I personally, and I on this podcast, I'm saying right now, I'm putting Grayson Flittner in a 3-point contest against anyone right now. He's retired, and I'd put him against anybody right now. I guarantee it. But at Compete Training Academy, we really pride ourselves in being able to teach hoopers, how to shoot the basketball, and that's kind of what we do in Indiana. We shoot the basketball. How did you become an elite shooter?
yeah. Well, first, I still Google every once in a while to see if there's a professional pig or horse league that is going to come upon us, and maybe my calling is still out there.
I love it.
But still waiting on that. That hasn't shown up yet. But yeah, honestly, it goes back to just shooting, playing all the time, whether it was in the backyard or having an imagination on the indoor hoop and our little playroom. It just, I go back, and we're in March Madness time. I know that's winding down a little bit, but I remember getting the brackets when I was a third, fourth grader. I didn't even need anybody. I'd go out in the backyard. I'd fill that out. I would play as both teams. I'd go dribble up for a layup, block my own self, go back, shoot a last second shot, and then write that down and, go all the way through the bracket just playing with myself. I'm sure any neighbors or anybody else was thinking I needed to find some friends to play with, because sure, it looked a little funny.
I love it.
But I just
A true love of the game. A true love.
Yeah, and that's I have an 11-year-old daughter who's starting to play the AAU circuit a little bit, and just the other day, I asked her if she wanted to go shoot, which she does it on her own quite a bit, and she said no, it's too windy. And to me, that was a great opportunity to, let's see if I can't make some in the wind and learn how to play the wind a little bit, like a golf shot, if you would, or it's snowing out, you shovel it off, and you put some gloves on and you shoot. And there was never a bad time to go shoot. And I go back to that. She says there's a little bit of wind, and I'm like, that shouldn't stop you from, shooting. And so when you say great shooter, the Steph Currys, anybody, they just shot. They love to shoot. And even some of my most peaceful times in the world are when there was no one in a gym and you could hear the ball bounce echo 17 different directions, and you're in there for 2 or 3 hours. And so I just go back to repetition, and it's what I love to do.
Absolutely.
I say that.
Yeah.
It was before the social media times.
Yeah.
When, I want to tell kids, don't go in the gym to get an Instagram picture or to, that's to go there and say, I got a workout in, and then take a selfie. You didn't go get a workout in. Go, just go do it because you love it. Don't do it for advertising and to tell everybody you did it.
Man, absolutely. Man, I remember I didn't have a cell phone till college, and I remember I didn't even have a Facebook until my senior year of high school. And yeah, that's absolutely right. Get off the social media. And that doesn't surprise me, your answer. You were a great 3-point shooter because you love to shoot. You love the game. That's true with anything. You look at the best individuals at any industry. They're the best because they loved it. They absolutely love it. So that doesn't surprise me one bit to hear that. You just love to shoot the rock, man. Like
Right, man. Yeah.
you just love to shoot that thing, and that's really cool to hear. What are some of your favorite shooting drills? I'm curious if there's like one or two shooting drills like you could choose. What are you choosing?
Yeah, as far as shooting, I was pretty organic, honestly, with what I would do. I know the guns are out there. Honestly, I can tell you, in my time playing, I have shot on a gun a few times. As far as anything that goes, honestly, I loved having a teammate. I loved just getting some old school chairs out there as my screens. You know, if I was in season, honestly, I would, if we had plays set for me to shoot the basketball, I'm setting those chairs up and I'm shooting that 100 times, so I know when it comes into a game, I'm hitting that spot. Uh,
Yes.
Obviously, I loved a true teammate passing to me, knowing kind of where I was going to get the ball. As far as that, obviously, I'd do your spot shooting area, but I was pretty organic, honestly, with just using the chairs, knowing where my shots were going to come from, and living it as game like as possible. You know, you
Absolutely.
can go in the gym and be in there for 2 hours and have flip flops on, and you don't get anything out of it. I could go in for 45 minutes and know exactly what I was doing, and you know, get a
And
lot more out of it.
this was not scripted, ladies and gentlemen, and that is exactly who we are at the barn. And I'm not knocking the gun. I appreciate it, but here at the barn, we're not going to have it because just like Grayson is saying, that I mean, there's nothing like going out there with you, a ball, and a hoop, and just working on your game, throwing a chair out there, using it as a ball screen, or doing your spot shooting. Basketball basketball's not reinventing the wheel, guys. Like it's a simple game doing the fundamentals very, 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 very well. And so I love to hear that about you, Grayson. You're just old school and working on your game the right way.
Yeah, I'll even touch on it too with kids, because I get it from my daughter, and I hear that just working some kids out that I have here and there. When I stepped on the college campus, the very first thing we did was 1-2 stepping into a shot, learning how to refine and retune your pivot work, and all the very basics. I try to teach high school kids or seventh grade kid, and they think they're above that, and you are never too old to refine that, to get better at that little stuff, that basic stuff like you're talking about. If you get really, really good at that and combine that with basketball knowledge, a basketball IQ, you're gonna play. There's gonna be a spot on the court for you, because you know how to play the game, you know the fundamentals, and you understand that there's always a spot for guys that know how to play the game, not just who are the best players.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. And Grayson, you had the rare privilege to play after college, and there's not very many people that have that. And I believe you played in Australia. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, it's short time. I had pretty serious knee surgery after my junior year.
Yeah,
Was
I remember that.
microfracture surgery, which was supposed to take 12 months to heal, and go back. And I'm going off tangent a little bit, but I'll just
Oh,
lead up to had knee surgery, supposed to take 12 months. Going into my senior year, that didn't seem like an option. I came in to go back to being a good teammate. Came in with a bunch of freshmen. I wanted to go out as seniors with them. That was my commitment to them.
yep.
Um, it obviously helped that we had North Carolina and Duke on the schedule that year. So, finding a way to get on the court. So, cut my rehab about 6 months short, to
Yeah.
play my senior year. Wasn't 100% by any means, but was able to get through the year for the most part. Had an injury or two where it was had to sit a game or two out, but made it through. And then after my senior year, actually gave it a year to rest, thinking rehab it now, get it stronger, which is exactly what I did. Was feeling great. Got a contract in Australia, playing there, middle of the season, where I had my knee surgery, felt great. I could feel it in my other knee that I was having the same problems. And middle of the season, knew I had to have surgery on the other knee, other microfracture surgery, and kind of knew that was the end of the career, if you will, as much as I didn't want to admit it.
For sure, for sure. And I want to hear a little bit about your overseas experience, just kind of the day to day. It's obviously very different. I hear from pros all the time. I remember after my college career, I had an invitation to play in Ireland. Wasn't a guaranteed thing. It was just a tryout. But I hear from pros all the time of how it's just so much different than playing in college. You're not playing for that name on the front of your jersey, so to speak. So share with us about your opportunity to play overseas and just that experience you had.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily do the Europe stuff. So Australia was pretty laid back, honestly. Most of the people there living are pretty laid back, relaxed. Coach was awesome. Everything for me personally wasn't too much different from what I would do college wise. Outside of we would do practices a little different, do more team practices, if you will, I guess, and that could probably be just because colleges are limited somewhat on team hours and everything. Where professionally, it's obviously your job. That's what you do, and
Yeah.
but it was a good experience for me. If I would have had two good knees, I'm sure I'd still be over there doing it. Honestly, it was.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I get that. And really, really, Grayson, I want to close this podcast to share with us a time in your life you really had to compete. Our definition of competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard. So I'd love to hear a situation in your life where you really had to fight through adversity. And that's really why we have this podcast, to inspire others to fight through adversity. So share with us a time.
Yeah. And adversity to me, honestly, I have a pretty good perspective on life and realize how lucky we are to live where we do. And so my adversity and what true adversity is maybe a little different, but I guess a story where I had to fight through or battle some stuff was going into college. Obviously, I told you early on that I actually walked on at Gardner Webb. So I was the 15th man on the roster, which, going back to humbling experiences, I was always the man, if you will, or considered the number one option going to the 15th option. And to this day, I still don't know if it was the coach's doings or the seniors' doings or what, but I stepped on campus doing all the conditioning, doing all the weightlifting, doing all that. We get to the open gym segment at night after all that, where all of us 15 are there together for 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks I was on campus, seniors didn't let me play. All other 14 guys played. I sat there, had to watch, tried to get on the court. No, I'll never forget that. And like I said, to this day, I don't know if that was seniors' doings, trying to prove something, if it was the coaches trying to say, let's see if he breaks, if he quits, see how he handles it.
No kidding. Like
Yeah.
you've never asked the coaches about that.
Yeah, to me, it never mattered. Once again, it was one of those, I get to show them. And like I said, going back to adversity, it wouldn't have done any good to go crying. It wouldn't to complain. Just, it was, all right, let's stay poised. How can I handle this? I know in the grand scheme of things, playing in these open gyms don't matter to practice, don't matter to play, so I went from literally 15th on the roster. By the time Christmas break rolled around, I was in the starting lineup and started
Yeah.
the rest of my career. And once again, a lot of people could have folded, could have
Yes.
complied. To me, it was just here's another opportunity. Once again, if I wouldn't have stayed poised, if I wouldn't have had perspective, maybe I go down the wrong path. Maybe I give in. Maybe you quit. I don't know what people do in those situations. But to me, it's how do you hunker down? How do you process? And how do you use it to your advantage? Um, Once again, that's how you do life, right? You stay poised, you try to figure it out, and you control what you can control, and what's out of your control, no reason in worrying about it, because you can't do anything about it. So that's, I guess, if you will, the time I have for you.
Well, I would say, Grayson, 100%, you're a rare breed, because I do know the normal reaction to people that would have been in that situation. They would have quit. They would have left. They would have completely gotten out of there.
Yeah, and that just lets somebody else win, right? You did what they wanted,
And that attitude right there, literally, you telling that story is giving me chills down my spine. And that's what it means to compete. You got to fight. And wherever you are right now, listener, you have got to fight. You got to compete, whether you're on the basketball court, whether you're in business, whether you're wherever you're at. Hard times are coming. You get put on the bench for whatever reason. You just got to keep fighting. Don't quit. You got to compete. And it's cool to see in Grayson's situation, he kept competing and fighting, and he set the record in the Dean Dome for the most three-pointers ever made. He beat Kentucky and scored 20 plus points. He scored 20 plus points against Oklahoma, UConn with Blake Griffin, and has all these stories to share and to give back to everybody else because he didn't quit. All this podcast could not be happening right now if he decided to walk away and go back to Sharpsville, Indiana. That's what it means to compete.
yeah,
that story just sends chills down my spine.
Yeah, and I guess I would add even a little more as we're talking to it. I'm sure you're wanting to wrap up, but it just kids that aren't in the spotlight or aren't getting all the minutes, if you will. The 2 minutes that you are given, go make the most of it and take baby steps at stuff. I think everybody wants instant gratification nowadays, and I know I say in the process, but if you're given 2 minutes at the end of the game, earn 4 minutes the next game, and then you get 4 minutes. Do your job. I remember I even skipped from being the 15th man to starting. In the early November games where I'd get the 2 and 3 minutes, my job wasn't to go in and score the 15 and 20 points. It was, you better go hit your open one shot that you get.
Yeah.
Go defend. Don't make any mistakes. And so I understood my role, was more than willing to accept that role, and accept your role. Don't necessarily have to be happy with your role, but grow into the role that you want by proving yourself time and time again. It is for any athlete or kid that is a JV player that wants to be a varsity player, or a varsity bench player that wants to be a varsity starter. Don't let someone else win. Do what you can do, and a lot can be said for that. But
there's no doubt about that. And Grayson, we live in an instant gratification society that wants everything now. And I just love your story, appreciate your story, appreciate your hard work, and really defines what it means to compete, what it means to really get after it, to do what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard. You didn't fold in times of adversity. And that's my encouragement to you. And this is why this podcast exists. For those of you listening, is wherever you're at, we're all going through tough times. We're all going through adversity, but don't fold, don't quit. Everything you're going through is to make you better, to make you into the person you're supposed to become. And I think it's just so cool to talk with Grayson here tonight and see where he's at today and see all the lessons that he's learned throughout his career that he can share his wisdom tonight. And so, Grayson, thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom. Dude, you're always welcome on this podcast. You're always welcome up here at the barn. Like I said, you got an open invitation. I'd love to host you here and your family, and we'll grill out and chat up some more stories sometime for sure. But thanks for joining the
Absolutely,
podcast.
man. No, I appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I don't get to go back down memory lane very often, so hey, it was a fun time, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Compete Training Academy family, always remember, competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard.